I'm a long-time reader, first-time poster, so I don't even know if this is the right place to post this on. But it was incredibly terrifying and still gives me chills, as cliché as that sounds. I know some people say these stories are 100 true for immersion, but believe me when I say that this is 100 true. 3 of my friends and I were spending the night together on New Year's Eve, about a year ago, and we decided we wanted to spend the night in a tent, outside really close to the woods. We were laughing and fucking around. You know, normal teenage things. Then, we heard this rustling outside in the leaves. Figuring it was just an animal or something, we shrugged it off. At this point, it was nearing midnight and we had a flashlight on in the tent, and we were blasting music. That's when all hell broke loose. We heard this chirping noise outside. When I say chirping, I don't mean it was like a bird or a raccoon, but this unearthly chirping that didn't sound like any animal at all. In fear we were about to be ambushed, I demanded my friends temporarily turn off the lights and the music. At first they looked at me like I was crazy, but I strengthened my tone. Turn it all off. Now. At this point, they knew I was serious, so they turned it all off and listened. There it was again. This unearthly chirping that didn't sound like anything. My friends and I were shitting bricks, but I was a little bit braver than the rest of them. I had been taking karate for about 4 years, and I'm a very tall female capable of taking down a grown man, so I figured I could take whatever was out there, or at least I could carry one of my friends if we had to run away. They all tried to play it cool and said it must have been one of those screamer firework things, but I could tell they were all shitting themselves. We carried on screwing around for a few more minutes, desperately trying to forget about the screech chirping thing outside. Then we heard it again, this time much closer to our tent. This was the first time I could properly hear it. When it made a clearer sound, reality drop kicked me in the stomach. It was fucking big, and it was almost right outside our tent. My friends and I were about to shit ourselves, so they start asking me questions as to what I thought it was. I was the friend who was into all things paranormal, and I still am, but I've never been a paranoid person, so they asked me. I told them just as a suggestion that it could be a skinwalker or a fleshgate, because I read somewhere that they mock the voices of your friends, of emit noises that they think will lure out their victims. I only said this because I thought that could explain the scream chirp, but I think they were really scared. We heard it again. At this point, everyone was shitting bricks, and one of them eventually called her older brother to come and hang out with us for a while. While he was there, just our luck, we couldn't hear the chirp screech anymore. Damn. We hung out with him for a while until we all decided to go on a walk with. The walk was fun, and my friends were terrified because we were walking around in the dark. But I've always liked the dark, as it was so vast and mysterious. I was also hoping we would find the fleshgate so my friends would stop acting like stuck-up little shits that weren't scared because I could see they were shitting themselves. Part of me was also terrified to see what would happen if we stumbled across a fleshgate, but her older brother had a knife with him, and I was prepared to stab it if he wasn't. We were blasting music again and playing with a multicolored strobe light. Probably not the best way to avoid being jumped in the night now that I think about it. My friend's brother had left us his knife in case we heard anything else that night. My friends all decided that I was the only one who would be brave enough to actually stab someone or something, if it came to it, so I was in charge of holding the 6-inch knife all night. Thankfully, it was in a sheath, because despite my training, I'm quite clumsy, especially this late into the night. I couldn't help myself taking the knife out of the sheath, because it was so interesting and beautiful looking. There it was again. The same fucking chirp screech. I unzipped the tent to look, knife drawn, and heard something scurry away quickly into the woods. Since my friends didn't hear it, I left it alone. Everything was fine for the rest of the night. That is, until I was the only one awake. I heard this horrible scream howl, much more blood-curdling than the chirps. It kept getting closer to the tent and then backing away, like it somehow knew I was the only one awake. It circled us, made itself sound distant, then come back with another howl. One of my friends briefly awoke and told me it was probably someone having a party, but I could tell she was just saying that so she could get the sleep. she desperately needed. Me, however, I could go for 3 days straight without having to sleep once. I was perfectly fine without sleep, unless I had a long day of school the next day or something. Believe me when I say, I didn't let my guard down once. I listened to this thing, and the location the cries took place. I wasn't about to let some fucking fleshgate or some shit come and kill my friends. And on a night that was supposed to be fun, I drew the knife a few times and practiced slashing the air in case it attacked. But it never did. The fucker just spent hours taunting me, trying to draw me out. I was incredibly tempted to run out there just to get a look at it. But I knew that was exactly what it wanted, waiting for me not to be in a group so it could pick the threat off. There was no way in hell I would let it anywhere near my friends. The older brother had left to go to a friend's house later that night as well, and the friend we were all staying with lived with her grandma. No strong men. I lived around the neighborhood and both my mom and my dad were home. My dad is a big guy standing at 6'2" and strong as hell, but it would be too far to run. I couldn't go out there to see what it was even if I wanted to. Even though I'm pretty damn fast, I was weak considering how late it was, and I would become this thing's prey. Knowing this, I just laid back, knife at the ready, listening in absolute horror. You don't know what true vulnerability is until you're on the outskirts of the woods in a tent, with 3 lives in your hands, while some paranormal creature is hunting you, teasing you, and you only have a close combat weapon that you're not even certain would put a scratch on it. I sat there in silence until around 6 in the morning when I was certain it had stopped. I couldn't take it anymore. The damn thing had driven me insane. My work there was done as I was certain it was gone. I left the knife on my pillow and a note that said I went home and I wasn't dead, so I could reassure my friends when they woke up later on. I began to walk home to my house with the streets poorly illuminated by street lamps. There weren't that many, leaving a fuckton of dark spaces that I couldn't see even if I tried. To make matters 10 times worse, my glasses were smudged and I could barely see a fucking thing out of them. I knew it was better to my advantage if I kept them on though, because I'm blind as a bat. I scanned my surrounding my whole way there, keeping my eyes on every direction this thing could attack me from. The fucker was probably just waiting to get me alone, but I wasn't going to let it do anything to me. When I finally got to my house, the door was unlocked to my relief, so I could get in without my parents hearing me. Unfortunately, this was 5 in the morning and, as I mentioned before, clumsy as ever, so I bumped into everything as I tried to navigate myself to my room, where I forced myself to go to sleep. After that, when asked, my friends would say it was a screamer, firework, or some animal, but I can tell they were scared and just trying to make sense of it all. I tried to make sense of it too, but I just couldn't. I knew what I heard, and it was much worse than they could have imagined. They probably thought I mentioned flesh gates and skinwalkers just to scare them, but I truly believe it was one of the two. Nothing like this has ever happened again, but there's a reason we haven't been sleeping outside in a while. It was too long. I'll sum it up. Friends and I camping outside the woods and were being hunted by a flesh gate. There. Don't get me wrong, I still love the dark, but this turned us all away from it for a bit. Feel free to send me any questions or comments, and I'll update if I ever have a similar experience or Mr. Fleshgate has come back for a round 2. I may share some of my other scary paranormal experiences in the future, but until then, please be careful while camping anywhere. You never know what can be lurking around in the dark. I went to a New Year concert where a guy I was semi-seeing and his band were playing. I had planned on surprising him because I originally thought I couldn't make it. Midway through the show, he's like, "I'm dedicating this next song to a special lady." She said she couldn't make it, but I just spotted her in the audience, and I couldn't be happier. My heart was aflutter. "Here's to you, Anna." "My name is not Anna." He pulls some other girl on stage and starts serenading her. I honestly thought I was going to die then and there. As soon as I could escape, I ran out of the venue crying all the way down Essex, stopped in a bodega, bought a 6-pack of Coors Light, and drank them on the train ride home. My ex-girlfriend, who was new to New York at that time, begged me to go see the ball drop in Times Square. Living in Bergen County, working in city during school and professional years, I tried to convince her not to, but ended up going. We somehow ended up at 40 of 6, and heard the ball drop and hear everyone scream Happy New Year. Not too long afterwards, she dumped me over text. I worked at a bougie wine store last year. Worked until midnight, had customers demanding cold champagne all night. Ran out by 8. Tried to move the delivery van, and had a mad Brooklynite tell me she's beat my ass if I took her spot. Had a customer ask for my manager, because I didn't have the time to wrap her case of wine individually at 6 p.m. on New Year's Eve. He sided with her. A few years back, I was dating someone who was like a 30 when I was like 19. He invited me to his friend's huge and awesome New Year party in BK. At a super fancy apartment complex. Dressed to the T's, we showed up and it was literally just 4 people. 2 couples and us. Everybody was in normal clothes. They played Wii Sports and ping pong and then went up to his apartment where we drank wine and watched the nigh ball drop. It was terrible. It wasn't even the age difference. They were just so boring. Then at midnight, he didn't even kiss me. We just watched all the out couple kiss each other. Terribly awkward. All my other friends were in Jackson Heights dancing and getting fucked up. I was miserable. We couldn't even have nice sex because I was on my period. This happened on New Year's Eve of 2021 when I was 17 on a now deleted app called It's Me. It was an app where you could talk to people all around the world without the fear of showing your face, as you created your own animated avatar. Looking back, the app was a really enjoyable experience as I met people I'm still friends with today. But most people who used It's Me could agree that it could get toxic. Many users, including myself, trolled parties which were basically live streams where a host could allow 3 other people to be talking with them, and the party's guests could comment in the chat. One time I was trolling a party when I was new to the app, and the host was, unbeknownst to me, quite notorious on the app and already had a large following. Before this, I'd never heard of the host, although I knew a couple of her friends. Her name was Kaylani and mine was Selena's. Usually, the people I trolled didn't have the reaction I wanted, i.e. arguing back. But this host started arguing back, and we went back and forth for a while, with the party getting many guests and the comments were going wild. After the party, I texted her on the app going back and forth with her again until we were full-on beefing, and I asked her to pull up. Really, I didn't want to fight this girl because I was only arguing with her in the first place for shits and giggles, but she was taking me serious. She told me she lives in Chicago, and I live in Milwaukee, so I thought there's no point in driving 1.5 hours just to fight a girl that I've never even met. At the time, I was stupid and still had the mindset of a hood rat, so me pulling up to this girl wasn't far-fetched. It got to the point where this bitch wouldn't shut up, so I did something I still regret to this day. I told her I'd meet her at her place if she was with it, and she accepted. I hopped in my car and put her address in the GPS. Not gonna lie, the apartment building she lived in looked sketchy and ghetto. But I didn't really care because I also was from the hood. I brought my twin sister with me, just in case Kaylani had people with her to jump me. As we pulled up, I saw a girl who looked to be Hispanic and had sneakers and a hoodie on, so I presumed it was her because of her accent and her clothes. I told my sister to wait in the car because she looked to be alone. I ran up to her and we started fighting. Not to brag or anything, but I've been in many fights growing up in the hood, so I do know how to defend myself properly. To be honest, I was getting the best of her when out of nowhere, some guy proceeds to pick me up and try and separate us. At first, I thought it was some kind of security of the apartment building, but he wasn't wearing any kind of uniform or anything. Actually, he looked quite a mess looking back, and he reeked of alcohol too. He managed to somehow separate us, even though at this point I was going batshit crazy and Kaylani was still trying to get little hits in. By this time, my sister came out of the car when she saw the guy getting involved and presumably Kaylani's friends who came from inside the building trying to hold her back. After we were separated, the guy literally starts dragging me to a rusty, beat-up black Honda that was parked nearby. I started fearing for my life and screamed my sister's name. She came sprinting, but the guy had already opened the trunk and threw me in, trying to shut the trunk. I was kicking and screaming, but he was really strong and managed to shut the trunk. My heart practically stopped when I felt the car speed off. I can still remember my sister's screams for help. We drove for 5 minutes and I'm claustrophobic, so I was frantically trying to get out the tiny trunk. I was texting my sis and luckily she informed me. She had called the police already and she was following the car. After a few minutes, the car stopped and he lifted the trunk and dragged me by my hair into some house that looked run down and dirty from the outside. He practically threw me into the house, and I saw my sister running after the guy with a baseball bat we brought just in case anything bad was to happen. She managed to get one good hit on the man with the bat, but he kicked her off and locked the door. Even though I heard sirens nearby, I was still terrified of what he was going to do to me. He dragged me into some room in the back of the house, and the whole time I was fighting him off as best I could. The police burst in a couple seconds later, however, and tackled the man. Surprisingly, he didn't resist and was quite calm, letting them handcuff him. I was reunited with my sister, and in that moment, I realized how precious life can truly be. Ever since that day, I changed for the better. Me and my sister no longer beef with anyone, and we've definitely grew up in the past year. After the incident, Kaylani left the app. I decided to call it quits me soon after as well, because many people I was cool with starting moving on, and I wanted to leave the memory of that day behind. I never told anyone on It's Me what happened, not even my friends, as I was afraid no one would believe me. So if there's anything to take away from this story, it's to not make dangerous decisions like I did that day, pulling up to a sketchy neighborhood to fight a stranger. The It's Me app was shut down on August 10th of this year and was replaced with a new app code. Recently, I moved back to England with my sister, and we both go to an amazing college here. I hope y'all stay safe and have a Merry Christmas and an even better New Year. I would like to preface that this isn't a made-up story for clicks. All comments, from believers and skeptics, are welcomed and encouraged, as either way I'd like to get down to the root cause of this experience, as I fear it may happen again some. New Year's Eve, 2022. 15 or so close friends and I were having a party with my friend. We'll call her Angie. Second home, which used to be a small destination BB on the West Coast. I closed at least 50 years ago, so it was the perfect place to throw a party. A big common area, lots of rooms, extra beds, etc. Despite being New Year's, we mostly had Halloween decor up on the walls. Similarly to this party, Angie threw a small Halloween party with the same people. We just got a little drunk and played with some creepy ghost shit, one of our friends. Nothing big. It's important to note that when playing, only Angie believed in ghosts. The board didn't give us much. It just said something about a prostitute that used to take clients to the one master bedroom. So probably the 1850s. I wasn't fazed, but Angie was kind of freaking out. So we ended quickly. After having spent so much time in the inn, she really believed. So as not to upset her, no one ever asked her about what she thought of the ghost prostitute. She just seemed so freaked. My friends and I are definitely more tipsy than on Halloween and are playing a drinking game in the inn sunroom, which has large glass windows. Suddenly, in the middle of my other friend and her boyfriend, we'll call them Dakota and Abe, taking shots, there's a large bang on the window. Everyone looks up, laughs it off, and assumes a bird hit the window, or it was our other friend. We'll call him Mark. Mark wasn't feeling the drinking game and said he was going to go explore some of the suites on the top floor. He had probably just got bored, went outside, and stupidly wanted to pull a joke on us. I look over at Angie, and she's just staring at the window, wide-eyed. Angie says, "Abe, go check it out." Abe responds that Angie should since it's her parents' inn. But all she says is, "I'm not fucking going out there." Abe, clearly annoyed, grabs his drink and walks out onto the back steps of the inn. Behind the building is just a large field, with no roads. The field ends at the edge of the cliffs, and then it's just ocean. Abe walks out on the steps and mockingly spins around, showing that no one is out there. Angie is still clearly freaked out, so to try to calm her nerves, I step outside on the porch with Abe, showing her it's safe. Nothing spooky. I turn around to Abe to tell him to stop freaking Angie out when I see a glimmer of something behind his right shoulder. The best way I can describe it is that it looked like a car light, but eerily misshaped, like someone carved out a headlight before attaching it to their car. Normally, even with the weird shape, I wouldn't think anything of a parked car, but it was behind the inn. No one should even have access to drive behind the inn, and I know none at the party did because I came early to help Angie set up. Keys were taken at the entrance too, so now someone could run back to their car after entering the inn and drive their car around and leave it running in the back of the inn. I looked back at Abe, who also saw the light. He wasn't frozen in fear, he just stood there, eyes wide, like the light had stuck him in a sober trance. After that, we all heard a bang from the kitchen. After the 10 or so of us ran over to check what it was, we found that the frozen pizza that was in the oven had exploded. Then, immediately after, there was a loud boom from above the kitchen, most likely from the master bedroom. No one wanted to check it out, but Dakota made Abe and a couple of the friends he brought go upstairs and check. They were so scared that they took a baseball bat. Waiting for them to creep up the stairs felt like an eternity. The lobby was eerily quiet, like the air had settled in place and it froze time for those three. Then I hear Abe yell down the staircase. The lamp just fell down in the master bedroom. After that, the clock struck 12, and we tried to continue with the party, but everyone was freaked. Abe and I didn't even tell the others about the weird headlight we saw, because we were just too scared. We live in an area with a lot of homeless people, so maybe someone was watching us, but that doesn't explain the pizza exploding and the lamp falling one after another, like someone was taunting us. I don't even know if the three events are connected. Angie thinks they are, but I don't believe in ghosts as much as her. But I'll never get over that engulfing feeling of being watched I felt when standing on the deck, and I know, despite not saying anything, that Abe felt it too. Last year at about 2 a.m. New Year Day, I heard a loud noise. Sounded like someone drove to the end of my street and hit the dumpster. The sound was a loud, metallic, almost hollow sound. I went outside to investigate since my car is parked along the street, and I wanted to make sure it wasn't hit. I get outside, and it's dead quiet except for a female making noise. I live in an apartment building right next to the interstate, and on the other side of that is a hospital with a huge parking lot. I heard the female and figured kids were out screwing around in the parking lot. But as I listened closer, I noticed the female was crying and saying things like, "Oh my God," over and over. I went inside and bundled up since it was about 20 degrees of outside. Then I walked a short distance and up a hill to the fence line to the interstate. It was dark, but I could see the shape of an overturned vehicle in the road and the silhouette of another car on the shoulder. Traffic was very, very light. Right then, a police cruiser pulled up slowly and shone his lights on a mass in the road. He flipped on his emergency lights, turned his car so his lights were facing oncoming traffic, and set about putting down flares. I went back inside to grab better gloves, and when I came out, there were several emergency vehicles there, and they were setting up floodlights. The mass in the road was a body. Luckily, I didn't see details. By the time there was enough light, the body was covered. I never saw the female. Later, I learned that two guys in a BMW were driving fast and tried to pass the female driver. They lost control and flipped the car. They were both ejected from the vehicle. One ended up in the ditch and the other in the middle of the highway. The guy in the ditch lived. Apparently the female driver stopped and tried to help, and that's who I heard.